I was still enjoying the panelists, their very interesting ideas, controversial subject, but time is not on our side. When we received the invitation from the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, I said to my office, I want to be here the whole day. But it was not possible because I had to chair the JCPS cluster because of the challenges that many of you are aware of in the country with justice, crime prevention, and so on. But let me thank you, Program Director, former President of South Africa and patron of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, His Excellency Thabo Mbeki, former Prime Minister of Australia, His Excellency Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister of Mali, His Excellency Moussa Mara, Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Togo Didiza. I didn't see her when I was coming in, maybe she's left. Former Minister of Commerce and Industry of India, Honorable Anand Sharma, Chairman, Observer Research Foundation of India, Mr. Sanjay Joshi, President, Observer Research Foundation, India, Mr. Samir Saran, Chief Executive of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Mr. Max Botwana, distinguished guests, and everybody here present this afternoon. I'm really delighted to have been invited to participate in this second Cape Town conversation. The conversation takes place at the time of tectonic shifts in global politics. The world is facing a polycrisis characterized, amongst others, by high levels of poverty, inequality, economic stagnation, climate change, wars, amongst others. Over the past 3 days, we are aware that delegates here have engaged in identifying responses to the emerging challenges, including assessing progress on the outcome of the first Cape Town conversation. We regard this gathering as a critical and important platform in which you have taken it upon yourselves to reimagine the world by having honest reflections about where we are globally, and most importantly, how we want to chart the path ahead. Equally, in our country, over the past 30 years, since the dawn of democracy, we have been hard at work building a better life for all and contributing to a better Africa and a better world. We have taken it upon ourselves that our development as a country is intricately linked to the development and growth of our continent and indeed the world. In this context, we have been working on the continent for peace, stability, and security to silence the guns. Equally, we take a non-aligned stance in conflict and prioritize social justice, peace, and development across the world. Similarly, we have always been critical of the reforms of the United Nations and all its organs because we want equal opportunities for the rest of the continent. We have also demonstrated our appreciation and commitment for peace by taking Israel to the ICJ because of the crimes committed against the people of Palestine, particularly in Gaza. As President Mandela said, we know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. It is for this reason that we stand in solidarity with others. We stand in solidarity with the people of Cuba, Western Sahara, Sudan, South Sudan, and many parts of the world where there is conflict, where there is wars and insecurity. This we do because of solidarity and our commitment to unity. Compatriots and fellow delegates, we must resolve conflicts in Africa. In this regard, I would like to thank President Mbeki for his continued efforts for peace and security of the African continent. Equally, we must find lasting peace across the world, since when there are wars and conflicts, access to key resources becomes a big challenge, affecting economies, but more importantly, development. As countries of the Global South, we must therefore firmly ground our multilateral cooperation in the synergy between peace and development. Compatriots and fellow delegates, South Africa will assume the G20 presidency on the 1st of December this year, in a few days' time. The overarching theme that we chose for ourselves as South Africa, as we will be taking the presidency, is solidarity, equality, and sustainable development. South Africa intends to place Africa's development at the top of the agenda of the G20. We shall use this opportunity presented by the G20 to advance the priorities of the AU's Agenda 2063, which is the Africa we want. And we will do this in close collaboration with all others in the African Union. Through our G20, or throughout our G20 tenure, we will guarantee that the G20 remains attuned to the requirements of the developing economies in Africa and the broader Global South. South Africa firmly believes that the G20, with the United Nations at its center, is vital in accelerating the implementation of sustainable development goals. The global stagnation in advancing sustainable development is concerning and highlights the need for international cooperation in addressing these challenges, including those related to illicit financial flows, as an example. This would ensure that low and middle income countries have equitable access to sustainable development. Compatriots and fellow delegates, you will agree with me that there needs to be an expansion in the accessibility of affordable, reliable, and sustainable finance for low and middle income countries. Our countries also still need to make strides in areas such as energy, capacity building, access to affordable technology, particularly in the public domain, mutually beneficial technology cooperation, financing mitigation actions, particularly in the energy sector. Following some of your discussions, I'm pleased that there is some consensus that we should strengthen global collaboration through multilateralism to achieve our goals. South Africa believes that multilateral development banks and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, needs to be reformed to meet the needs of growing economies for sustainable development and climate resilience. This is some of the things I had the panelists also advocating. Presently, multilateral support is out of reach for most of the world's population, particularly due to risk-averse lending policies that impose heavy costs and conditions. South Africa is acting as a bridge between the global South and the international community, advocating for inclusive policies that represent the interests of low and middle income countries. As a member of international organizations like the United Nations, the African Union, BRICS, South Africa actively participates in domestic efforts to address these issues that are affecting developing countries. South Africa advocates for policies encouraging economic development, poverty eradication, social fairness, and sustainability in developing countries. This includes fair trade and fair trade agreements, debt relief, access to critical services such as healthcare and education, and also combating climate change. Through advocating for these interests on a global scale, South Africa ensures that the voices of these countries in the global South are heard and their demands are met in these international talks. This role as a mediator and advocate for the global South assists in building a more equal and inclusive international community. Compatriots and fellow delegates, South Africa also places importance on the issue of critical minerals and will seek to highlight this during its G20 presidency. The country aims to address issues of beneficiation, domestic resource mobilization, critical mineral strategy, interdependent supply chains, and natural capital. These minerals are crucial for a just transition and a green economy, and deliberations on the type of investment required to address these issues remains relevant today. During the Foundation's Africa Day lecture, Professor Adulei Bathili asked this question, whether Africa should remain the provider of raw materials whilst our population is dying of hunger. This question struck me and remain a point I continue to ponder on. And I want to say that indeed we must not continue to be raw material suppliers and allow our fertile lands to be auctioned off by international investors who come to exploit our raw minerals and export them to other countries. At the same time, our people remain jobless and continue to languish in poverty. Compatriots and fellow delegates, over the past 3 days, some discussions, some talks have centered on the transformation of global governance, creating new growth pathways, and developing actionable solutions. In this regard, we are dedicating ourselves to offering a distinct opportunity to elevate the requirements, aspirations, and ambitions of countries in the global South. South Africa intends to build on the success of the Indonesian, Indian, and Brazilian G20 presidents and use its presidency to advance global reform agendas, particularly, as I said, in transforming global financial architecture and reforming those institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, and some of these multilateral development banks. We are also considering monitoring the G20's past commitments and the possibility of a G20 review. As we all know that with South Africa taking over the presidency, we are now completing a full cycle. So we think there should be a review of what has been happening before we will obviously hand over to the United States to take over. South Africa will thus persist in promoting, and this is very important to us, persist in promoting the peaceful resolution of global conflicts. Our foreign policy is guided by the principles of solidarity, peace, equality, human rights, and sustainable development for the collective benefit. We will persist in fulfilling this commitment without undue pressure and in line with South Africa's national sovereign interests. We welcome Lebanon's ceasefire and hope for an end to the genocide in Gaza. We hope that the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah will help bring stability to the region and end the cycle of violence along that border. What we want to see now is the urgent need to improve humanitarian conditions. Let the guns be silenced in this continent, but also around the world, and let unity and peace reign. Ladies and gentlemen, amid all these challenges, there are many opportunities. We believe the Global South remains the ray of hope. It encapsulates regions where economic growth has remained steady, populations are receptive to new ideas and transformative policies, and the political will for change remains very strong. We can all agree that countries in the Global South have immense potential for growth and development, which exists in our communities. We can capitalize on these new opportunities, whether in business, education, or innovation, to uplift and empower one another. Africa has been gaining more attention from the international community because of its dynamic economic progress. But as developing countries, we should also leverage on the digital economy to transform traditional economic processes, as this is the direction the global world is headed towards. Therefore, we must ensure that entrepreneurs, innovators, and workers harness digital technologies to meet their needs. However, we remain cognizant that the Global South is also industrializing and digitizing simultaneously. It is important for us to maintain balance and be inclusive in our programs and policies so that we leave no one behind. We must capitalize on the opportunities presented by the African Continental Free Trade Area, which establishes a unified continental market for products and services in Africa. It seeks to expedite inter-Africa trade and has the potential to enhance our economies and improve the quality of life of the people throughout the continent. This will result in the diversification of exports, the acceleration of growth, and an increase in investment and employment possibilities for South Africans and other Africans, and of course, the broader continent as a whole. For success, African countries must prioritize the development of infrastructure, particularly for rail and road transport, as it is the most favored mode of transporting products, services, and also passengers. We must also invest heavily as South Africa in our ports to ensure efficient freight logistics. And as we do so, we also work with others in the continent. Compatriots and fellow delegates, another obstacle to our success is the effect of climate change, which impacts the environment and livelihoods and result in socio-economic distress. To prevent such occurrences, we must remain dedicated to fulfilling the obligations outlined in the nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. To effectively respond to these disasters, and many of you would probably have seen in our own country here in various provinces, we've had floods and fires, etc., in KZN and other parts of our country. We must adjust our macroeconomic policies and create policy flexibility to address these challenges that we face today, especially these frequent weather shocks. We must also enhance infrastructure to be able to enhance economic resilience. As we work hard towards net zero, wealthier countries must afford us time to adjust but also ensure financial support to countries in the global south, and also policy assistance where required. Fellow delegates, as I conclude, I want to say that as we part ways for our respective destinations, our focus should be on implementing what has been discussed in this conference, during these conversations. Because in many occasions, people go to conferences or seminars, we have good discussions, we take good resolutions, and then we don't implement. So it's important that we have to ensure that there is implementation. And indeed, the best way to measure a conference's success, it is to implement the resolution, so that when we come back to the next conference, to the next conversation, we are able to weigh and see if indeed we have been successful, and also see where the challenges still remain. Our country's development lies on our shoulders and nobody else. We must agree to do all we can to ensure a better future for the next generations. As former President Nelson Mandela once said, "It always seems impossible until it is done." Therefore, we must speed implementation, because the speed of execution is the one that is going to ensure that we succeed. The speed of execution must remain our mantra. I want to take this opportunities, compatriots and fellow delegates, to wish you well. I know that we will be departing to our various destinations, but I hope that we're not seeing one another for the last time. These conversations are very important, and I want to thank former President Thabo Mbeki for leading this charge. And President Mbeki, I am sure that we as South Africans have gained a lot of experience now that this is the second conversation. The next one, of course, we do want others to help us, but we, with yourself, will be at the forefront of it. We will invite you, but we are going to lead it. Yes. We have gained a lot of experience now, and I'll also make sure that my office make time that I participate throughout the day, because I want to, the engagements are very exciting, interesting. I want to be part of them. But thank you very much to afford me this opportunity as we come to the end of this important conference, these conversations. I'm looking forward to seeing you, most of you, again. Thank you very much.